confusion, because that's not what the history books tell us. This is not possible, according to current history books.
But how many years back are we actually going at this point?
Well, at this point, based on our stone tools and our stone artifacts and all the things that we've gathered, we're going back 300,000 years. You'll notice here that the obsession with these pointed tools, these tools that come to a point, is so obvious, you know. And when you see this lying in the field on its own, it doesn't look like much. But when you start collecting them and you suddenly put them next to each other, you realize we're dealing with a different class of stone tool that has never been recognized before. This museum is just so full of anomalies and confusing things that it just boggles the mind. But I want to show you, this is one of the last things that I found, was this here, what I call the Zimbabwe birds, or the birds, because these cultures were obsessed with discovering, with carving birds. First we see it in Zimbabwe, the more refined Zimbabwean birds with the broad little belly and the base, and then the top going to the top. And here you've got an example of the base of the belly and going to the top, and there's always this little angle at the top here, the head looking at the sky, and that's quite incredible. So here we find the prototypes, the very early prototypes of these Zimbabwe birds. Then in Zimbabwe they become more refined, they get eyes and wings, they're just more recent or more refined. However, these could have also had eyes and wings, they might have just eroded or peeled off because they're just a lot older. And then as you'll see later today, we're going to go up the mountain. I'm going to show you some of the ruins there. On the way down from one of the ruins, I find these things lying in the forestry roads, just trucks driving over them. They're washing down the mountain into the road, and no one's paying attention to it. People just ignoring it. It breaks my heart. And it's to do with the protection of the gold miners. This is what it is. These were mascots, and the mascots and the protectors of the early gold miners. We see it in Egypt. In Egypt, much later, many, many thousands of years later, we see the goddess Hathor being personified as a bird on a pedestal. And she was the goddess of gold mines and the goddess of gold miners, the protector of the gold miners.
Oh, really? So
the bird on the pedestal was often etched into the edges of the gold mines in Egypt and the Near East, the Middle East, going into the gold mines. And now you're finding the source of those birds on a pedestal in South Africa here with these very early rough prototypes, and then the more refined Zimbabwe birds further north.
And what about going into the gold mines themselves to look for these? I mean, I don't. Have you ever thought of going into those?
Yeah, look, we've got quite a few gold mines that I've looked at. If you look at my new book, Temples of the African Gods, there's some photographs of these gold mines, and then there's some other gold mines that are really deep that you need serious equipment to get out. That is a real expedition. You know, to go into dark caves is quite dangerous because there's a fungus that you pick up that is absolutely deadly, and there's no antidote for it. So be careful. Don't just go into caves because you may die. It's like,
really?
It's you know, these are all the things that you need to think about. It's called in Afrikaans, it's called grotkoors. It's a cave fever. I forget what the English name for the fungus is, but it's once you get that in your lungs, you're gone. This hollowed out stone, it looks like a crucible of sort, and you can clearly see the metallic sediment around the rim. Now I've checked this, and this is iron. This is iron sediment.
Okay.
Okay, which is just
it can't be the accidental, in other words.
Of course not. So somebody was smelting iron and using this as a crucible to create little molds, ingots or whatever, out of iron. And this here is a spectacular artifact because at first sight, all people just dismiss it. Ah, this is just just something to grind your maize in or your corn or whatever. And then you look at, well, why would they put a spout here or a funnel kind of thing? Okay, and then you look closely at it and you realize how badly eroded it is on the inside. If somebody's been using this until recently, it would have been very smooth.
Ah, yes.
Okay, so now you've got to use logic and a little bit of scientific thinking and extrapolation to say, okay, well, it obviously hasn't been used for a hell of a long time, and we're talking thousands and thousands of years, because this is hard granite.
Yes.
Okay, this doesn't erode easily. And it's eroded quite badly. It's rough on the inside. And then the spout, which is even rougher, And then you think, okay, wow. So obviously whatever they were doing in this was that important that they wanted to create a spout for it to pour it out. And then you step back and you notice, oh my goodness, look, there are marks here and marks there that tell us that this thing was suspended in the air so that they could tilt it and pour out whatever was in it.
Fascinating.
So this is just a very important piece of equipment in ancient times, and they, to go to this amount of trouble, whatever they were doing in this was incredibly important. You're not going to go to this amount of trouble just because you want to crush a few millis. When you lift these up, they all ring beautifully. But
it's important to add here that Michael is a sound engineer. That's another one of his jobs, and his mother was an opera singer, so he's very oriented towards sound and sound technology. So when he says they ring like bells, he actually knows what he's talking about.
Well, I'm going to show you now so that you don't call me a liar. Right? Now these you find, okay, wow, this is interesting. And that's an interesting little statuette, but again, look at that very sharp, flat point as it was used for something. You get exactly the same here. Look how beautifully tapered this has been. And then when you pick it up, sometimes even your fingers suggest that.
Yeah.
Okay, but then this one rings at a slightly different pitch. Okay.
Sounds like piano keys.
Now when you ring them together, you hear the two frequencies harmonize together or ring together. Can you hear?
Yes.
There's a clash. It's like playing two notes on the piano.
Yes.
This is what the rock looks like. It's black, very homogeneous. It's metamorphosized quartzite. It's known as hornfells.
I see.
And there you can see the patina, the skin of the rock. So this broke off because of heat. Okay, that's another very important indication and a clue. Whatever these guys were doing inside these ruins, they did not use fire. They did not use heat, because this was cracked as a result of fire. And so this is a very homogeneous, 54% silica dioxide, so it's really, we're talking crystalline substances. Okay, quartz crystal, mixed with iron and aluminium, and a little bit of manganese. And with that, they've got very specific properties, and those properties are resonant frequencies, acoustic resonance. That's what this is all about. Okay, and I'm going to show you why I can say that. Then.
That's amazing.
So, when I say they ring like bells, I'm not joking. If you close your eyes,
it sounds like a church bell, yeah.
Look at all the pictures, the aerial photographs that John Heine has been taking for 20 years. And since I got involved, we've taken a lot more. But even just the ones that we've got here, all along, each and every one is circular. Each and every one is unique. Okay?
Yes.
And they're very dense, as you can see. You flew over it the other day, so you now have a very good idea how dense this stuff is.
Yes.
And it goes on and on and on. It's larger than Johannesburg, larger than Los Angeles, the area that it
also,
covers.
they're each unique, which is very interesting.
Okay, now, the reason they're unique, the reason why they have this circular structure and yet they're unique, is because it's like cymatics. The stones, imagine the stones are grains of sand. It represents the sound frequency as it comes out of the earth at that spot. Each of the circles is connected to these channels. You're only, I think, the second or maybe the third person that has ever been taken up to fly and look at the ruins by Jan Heine and myself. This is the big ruin we call Blaubosch Kraal. Fortunately it's been preserved inside the Sappi forestry area, and we have a good understanding with the Sappi people under the Makamati Foundation. We have a clearing team and we work with the Sappi people to keep them clean and keep them preserved, so we can bring tourists here and show the people. Otherwise they'll be completely overgrown and you wouldn't be able to enter. I mean, all this has been cleared, as you can see, recently.
I see.
And so that you can have access. Otherwise, the grass is so tall and so thick, you can't even come through here.
I see.
Now, the interesting thing about this ruin is that this has got very strong links to the Hindu and the Dravidians, like I mentioned earlier. It's one of the most difficult and complex ruins to try and explain. Later, I'll show you the one at the top of the mountain is a lot easier. But what's interesting and quite confusing here is because it's been messed with so many times by passing cultures and passing civilizations that they've just rebuilt it and restructured it to their own needs and purposes. So that's what is so confusing about it. So the poor archaeologists arrive here and they look at this and they don't really know. You've seen the extent of it from the aeroplane, from the helicopter. Well, not a single archaeologist that I know of in South Africa has seen it from a helicopter. They just don't know the full extent of it. They don't know that there are 10 million of these ruins in South Africa. They think there are a few hundred or a few thousand. So they can't put it into context.
Yes.
So when they make what they call a detailed report, it's based on previously written historical books that they use as their springboard, and then they add their little bit to it. Well, that doesn't get us anywhere.
The geologist that we flew over the ruins with,
Gerard Groenewald. And he's a senior geologist worldwide. I mean, as you heard, he's famous. He discovered some dinosaur eggs. He was on National Geographic, and he became quite a controversial figure in South Africa and in the world because of his discoveries and his pronouncements.
And he was proven right about originally the dinosaur egg. He was told, oh, it's just a rock, and it was actually a real prehistoric.
And you heard him say absolutely categorically. You know, at first he was a bit reserved, and then by the time we took off and we flew over it in a helicopter, he turned around and he just looked at us and he said, "This is no way, this is natural rock, this was brought here by people, this was built by humans, and this is mind-blowing stuff." And by the time we flew here, and we flew over this whole area here, with those very dense visible settlements further up there from the helicopter, he just said, "This is ridiculous, this is unbelievable, this is old, this is thousands and thousands of years old. This is not something that was thrown together a few hundred years ago." So